Hi,
Hello,
I'm Julian.
I'm Tom.
We are Team Binge. We are here to talk about Severance, Season 2, Episode 8. This one was called Sweet Vitriol, which I believe vitriol is like a type of record player, so I don't know how that pertains to this, but this was a unique episode, Tom. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it. I found it captivating. They kind of gave us more of the outer world, which is nice. It does feel like Miss Cobell, the actress, they only had for like a day and in a different part of Alaska. And they're like, we'll just kind of write a story around what's going on with you.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it. We got some details that are super important. They might feel a little bit like wedged into the story. I was surprised by them, but I enjoyed the episode. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I enjoyed this episode. I think we got a big reveal at the end, which we'll talk through, but I would almost argue this could have been integrated through another episode that had our characters or innies and outies like yeah, while she's doing her adventure, we still could have kept up with our innies. But my thought is just they're going to this coastal sound. We got our town. We've got cool new scenery, which apparently this place is in Newfoundland. Is where they filmed it. So it looked really neat, and I think they wanted to keep the story to itself. But it was short. It was like I think a little under 40 minutes. We only got Cobell, and we had to meet a couple other kind of new characters that I don't think really filled much more of her story in to my liking. But I'm glad we got her backstory. I guess is the end of it, and I'm glad she's back.
Yeah, that's fair, Tom. I think from a budget standpoint, them being filming in where'd you say Newfoundland, and then having
Newfoundland.
to film in Kier, and then going back and forth, just moving the cameras back and forth between scenes, I think would really blow out that budget. So I understand why this was kind of. Is this a bottle episode? Is there a winter coastal shoreline episode? Is that what this would be called?
I guess so.
It
But yeah,
looked
Salt's Neck. Salt's Neck is the
Salt's
town,
Neck.
right?
Yeah, it did not look like a place I would want to vacation. I'll just say that.
No.
So, and we don't necessarily have to go scene by scene because this is just, essentially driving along the shoreline and then she's at the house. What I thought was interesting about this is they're painting this picture that Lumen has been obviously been around for a while. It exists out in the world, and there's kind of this cult of Egan, this cult of Lumen that they, I guess, used to get children on board to work for them, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
see kind of, it's almost like if businesses used Christianity to bring people in, and then we're like, hey, your work and your religion are the same thing. I'm sure there are probably businesses out there that do that, and maybe that's what they're commenting on. But I thought it was interesting that we have this like rundown former factory town. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
factory closed down, and so all these people are just huffing ether. But we also got more into kind of the religion piece and why Cobell is a company woman, I guess is the best way to put it. So
Right.
I found them rounding that out very interesting. But we didn't return to the severed office at all, so maybe I guess people could complain about that. But I did find this pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like the idea that we are getting more of like Lumen in the outside world. To your point, like their small town factory. This town existed because there was a factory. The factory goes away. This town essentially no longer exists, and all these people are now just high on the ether that was left by said factory, and just like all the pain and misery that was left by Lumen leaving, and how they essentially treated him if they had like essentially child labor. It was kind of gross and awful.
Oh,
But
Tom! I mean, they employed him at a young age. They gave him opportunity. What I don't. What do you mean gross and awful? They probably had benefits. Now they're retired. They're retired at. I mean, they both look like they're probably mid-30s, I guess. Miss Cobell and Hampton. They're probably living off some sort of sweet pension,
yeah,
and
yeah.
their medical allows them to purchase that ether. So, I think we got to look at this from the positive side. By the way, I'd like to talk to you about Egan and the 9 things that we live by after this call.
Excellent. Please do. I mean, I guess it does. It fills in the kids' resumes pretty early. So
Yeah, exactly. No, they're like, oh, from 0 to 15, what were you doing? Why is there a gap in your resume? And they're like, oh, no, I was definitely stirring a vat of ether at 3. Which there's a callback to this, right? There's some significance to like stirring a vat of ether in the story of Egan. I think they mention it in the callback.
they do. Like we get a lot of recap of like Cobell's story from the first season and what a little bit we had in the second season of her. And they do a quick back cut of Bert and Irving kind of admiring a painting of like Kier stirring, I guess, what seemed to be ether. And I guess that's like the story of when he met his wife. And you think it's like this loving story, but the way it's all kind of treated here, it almost seems like he might have just like taken his wife, not necessarily by will. Like it didn't seem like a story of love. But it's the idea that Lumen's working these factories and who knows what's going on.
Wait, you didn't think it was a great romance that he met her stirring a vat of ether and that they naturally fell in love? You think there's something a little bit more, I don't know, malicious to this?
Possibly. It wasn't my cup of tea for a meet cute, but
That's fair. What are your thoughts on, as someone recovering from ether, what was your thoughts of all of the ether usage during this episode, Tom? Did it make you want to ride the white lightning again?
no, it didn't. But I will say that, man, this seems like a very easy drug to take. All you gotta do is just huff it in.
Yeah.
Seems fun.
Well, I mean, I'm a needle guy myself. Forgive me. I get choked up when I think about all of the uses that ether has and how great it is. I really, when they showed the factory in this, I was like, oh, they were canning sardines. It kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever seen Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, how the town closed down because the sardine canning factory is no longer like optimal. That's what I thought of during this whole town. Or this town like makes snow. Those are its two exports: sardines, ether, and snow. It's the S's and the E's of this town, Salt Neck. So really, there's only 3 characters we focus on in this. We've got Harmony Cobell driving back to, I guess, her childhood town, right? And then we find his name later. It's Hampton. And this guy is played. Did you recognize this actor at all?
I didn't really recognize him, but he seemed to have a recognizable face. When I looked him up, the only thing I saw that I recognized potentially from is Point Break, like the OG Keanu Reeves version.
Sure.
And I think he like played one of the goons or guys, part of the crew.
Right. His name's James LaGrosse. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name right. I know him from Justified. He plays like this kind of sleazy criminal named Wade in Justified, and I was like, he looks so much better in this than he does in Justified. But I really enjoy him. He's just that guy that's like a character actor in a ton of stuff. So I enjoyed him. I was a little bit confused on whose house. Like, I knew it was Harmony's house that she grew up in, but I did not know who the occupant was.
Yeah, it took me a second to figure this out. Like at first I'm like, oh, is this her sister? Is this whatever? But I guess we find out it's her aunt.
Well, this is wrong of the show because you can't name a character Sissy and it not be her sister, because the whole time you're like, oh, Sissy, sister, yeah, I got it. Her name should have been Auntie if she's going to be an aunt. Come on, show, just sloppy work.
Right, agreed.
I guess you could argue her name is Sissy because she was the sister to Cobell's mom, but we don't. That's neither here nor there, you know? This house looked like a lovely house to grow up in, Tom. They probably did a lot of tobogganing in the winter and tobogganing in the summer, I would assume, too, right?
I do love how like Harmony, when she first goes to that little diner and then meets up with Hampton, like she essentially introduced herself. She's like, oh, it's Harmony Cobell. Well, flip my toboggan.
Right. You kind of get the sense that when she's like come from a small town, she's seen the big world, and she's like kind of playing with their like local, dialogue, but she's doing it in a way that is unfriendly because Mrs. Cobell is not the friendliest of persons.
She's not.
The all the height lines on the door frame of like, just so the show's like, hey, we want you to really understand she grew up in this house, and we're like, got it, okay. She was like 6 feet at 12. It looked like those lines were really tall. So does ether shrink you? Does ether usage shrink you, Tom? Is that, or maybe we don't want to get into the shrinkage of ether. Let's just move on. The aunt. Okay, so what I gather, the aunt is like all in on the religion of Egan, right? And so Cobell grew up in that, and there was a divorce of beliefs between her and her mom, and thus the sister of Sissy, correct?
Yeah, I think we find out later, like, you don't know what her mom's affinity of Kier and Lumen is, but we find out later that she apparently hated Lumen more than anybody else. So the sister was the one that was, like, big in on it, and I would understand why Harmony's mom hates him if they essentially abducted her child and indoctrinated into this universe, and then
you mean gave her employment. Sorry, I just want to clarify. You mean gave her employment. Okay, go on, Tom.
Gainful employment. Yeah. But we do get, and I guess we'll touch on it here a little bit, but like the idea that she won this like Wintertide Fellowship, because we heard Milchek kind of say that to Miss Wong in the previous episode, and now we're kind of getting an understanding of what that is. So she left this town at 12 because she seemingly was some sort of savant or genius, and the Egans took her away.
This is why we talk this out, Tom, and this is why you're a genius. So when our boy Milchek says to Miss Wong about the Wintertide Fellowship, we are now assuming that Miss Wong comes from a family that is like bought into the religion of Egan, and she is in that weird job in that office because it was seen as like a reward. And so now she is essentially Mrs. Cobell as a child. Like they're mirroring those two characters' journeys, correct?
Yes. So, and I like that bit because it gives Phyllis in about more of Miss Wong and where she kind of came from and what maybe her backstory is. I'd still be very interested to hear and learn more about it. But it does kind of take some of those theories at the board of like her being a clone or her being a robot or something like that. Like, no, she's just another kid that's indoctrinated into this world.
Sure. And the main mystery of this episode is when Harmony is in this house. She's looking for something. We don't know what she's looking for. And she's carrying around that breathing tube. Tom, when they showed the ventilator, when she hooks that up, did you notice, was that Lumen equipment?
I'm sure it would have been. But I mean, yeah, that was a goofy and weird scene. Like when she first connects that, I kept thinking like, okay, why did she carry this all the way from her house? Like, is this the thing she's looking for? I thought we were gonna get like a national treasure type situation where she plugs it in, breathes, and then like a compartment opens up.
And the Declaration of Independence falls out, signed by Kier. Oh,
yeah,
hail Kier.
That was how I thought it was hidden, but no, it was just a super weird. I guess she's trying to kind of connect with her mom in some form or fashion, but just lays there crying in that bed for hours on end.
Sure. Yeah, my spouse was like, "Oh, don't put that in your mouth. That was in someone's esophagus." And I was like, "Well, thanks for explaining that to me. I thought, we just like when you share a water bottle and you wipe it off with your shirt. I thought we were all good, but apparently we are not." This did kind of slow the episode down where I was like, what is she doing? But I guess she's just grieving her mother because she wasn't around when her mother died. I can understand that. But for a little bit of a slow episode to then like take a nap in the middle and make us watch you take a nap seemed a little aggressive, but
it's like they wanted to get you to nighttime, right? Because it made it a little more menacing when she's making her escape or she's going and looking for whatever else she's kind of looking for in this journey. It makes it a little more menacing.
It made us all forget that Hampton was outside waiting in the truck.
Yeah, poor guy.
He like comes in and she's like, "What do you want?" He's like, "I'm sitting outside. It's freezing." Like, how rude. Which she's been rude to him from the jump, but I guess there are some old romantic feelings. They fell in love over the ether vat at 7 years old, it would seem.
Yeah, they were so young. Like, they seem to have this, like, she makes mention in the beginning, like, hey, we're old chums, we're old colleagues kind of a thing. But then they have this, like, kiss, and it just seems kind of gross-ish of like them kind of if they were like fell in love or had some sort of romantic relationship of what you can at the age of 12 for them to come back like 30, 40 years later, however long it is. It was just weird and awkward.
I thought the kiss was beautiful. We're learning a lot about you, Tom. You don't love romance. I thought this was the loveliest romantic story I've ever watched in a TV. The greatest love story ever told, people are saying. A lot of smart people are saying that this is the greatest love story ever told. Let's talk the aunt, Tom. So the aunt, who is, we'll just say, a religious fanatic. We'll say enthusiastic about the whole Kier religion. A real Kier head, as they like to say. She says some incredible things. And I have never been one that can quote scripture like off the top of my head. I've got to like think about it. And so whenever I watch someone like this, I'm always very envious that they can just go to the pertinent line from the good book. And in this sense, it's the Kier good book. I guess what I'm saying is this aunt was my hero, Tom. If I could boil it down to just a few words, I loved this aunt. I found her incredibly creepy and menacing. But also, she's just firing off one-liners, and it was great.
She is. She was a fun character to introduce, and like what we saw.
Fun is the wrong word.
That's a fair point. I think I called the last episode "fun" on our podcast. I'm like, fun was probably not the right word to use for that. Enjoyable television is what I meant to say.
Sure.
But yeah, like she seems to have a lot more in common with like season 1 Cobell, or like Miss Selvig, as we kind of saw her in the outside world of like having the shrine and worshiping Kier and all that kind of jazz. Whereas Sissy here is isolated from Kier and Lumen, and the fact that Cobell or Harmony is now more integrated with the company and realizes all the shenanigans that they're doing, she's the one that's kind of conflicted. Like Harmony is still very much all in on Kier in the religious aspect of it, but she feel like we end this episode where her kind of wanting to burn it down, because I think they even wear some of the similar clothing and like this white frock, I don't know if you will.
Sure.
And yeah, seemed to kind of parrot a lot of the same lines that Harmony was delivering to our innies in the first season.
So let me ask you this: as she's headed to her hometown and she's going into this house, you still feel like she is, from like a religious or spiritual aspect, still bought in to the Kier of it all? And I'm talking about Miss Cobell at this point, because I get the sense that this is someone who like bought in and then saw the ugly truth and is now like kind of regressing and unpacking it, because she even there's a point where Cobell knows that Sissy has gotten a call from Drummond and she knows what's going on, and she's like, what would you have me do? Like, and I think she says like return and plead forgiveness.
Right.
And the way Cobell responds is like almost like snidely, like, oh, you're just quoting like the Kier at me, or the religion at me. And so I guess help me understand where you're at in terms of, is she still, she's not a company person at this point because she's rejected some of it.
Right.
Or
I think she's ultimately just conflicted, right?
Okay.
Because she has seen both sides of it. She's coming back. I think she made the decision once she left when Helena said like, oh yeah, come on inside, we'll talk to the board kind of thing. And then she sees that driver, she kind of hesitates and then leaves. Like that is her severed point with Lumen, essentially. She's like, I'm done. I'm going back. I'm going to get my book that kind of proves who I am and the value that I brought to this company to potentially try to burn it all down.
Sure. I do like how she plays this. I do like the idea of someone that has been like deep in a religion, coming out of it, and like still probably conflicted's a great way to describe it, Tom. Mm-hmm. You're just an incredible person. You nailed it.
I know all the words.
Right. And she does too. She knows all the words. She knows like when to hear them, how to use them. And then when they ring hollow to her, she like can tell that. And so when she's dealing with Sissy, I like that conflict. You've got someone who, and what does Sissy have to show for her devotion? She lives in this like refrigerator in the middle of nowhere and cuts her own hair clearly. So I don't know.
Well, and you see those parallels too, where Harmony goes upstairs and she sees the Kier shrine, which is very reminiscent of what Harmony had in the first season, and a lot of similar imagery where you see those 4 temper like mini statues, like their heads that we kind of saw dancing in the waffle party. There's like a little like poster on there that says "You must cut to heal," or excuse me, you must be cut to heal. And it's actually a poster we saw in Harmony's house in season 1, and a line Milchek uses, I think, with either Miss Wong or some of the other characters. So I like some of the through lines that are kind of playing together that are likely stripped directly from, the Cure book.
Sure. And I think you pointed this out, but like, did I clock it? There are like 4 animal heads on the shrine, and those are the 4 animal heads from the pancake party. Is that what it's called? Waffle party.
Yeah, the waffle. Yeah, there's like the goat head, and then there's like a crone, a mother, a maiden. Like, I can't remember exactly what the 4 were, but it's the 4 that represent the tempers.
Damn, how dare you? All hail Egan. I can't believe you've forgotten the 4 god animals. I don't know. It's all very weird. When people get to make up religions for shows, I bet they just have a ball of a time. I bet when people make up religions in real life, they're having a ball of a time. I don't know, Tom, I've got one question for you. And that question is, do you want to get high? That's all I could hear was Tally's voice from South Park.
You want to get high?
Want to get high?
I just kept thinking, like, should we be selling our own Team Binge branded ether?
Yes, yes. 100%.
A miracle cure-all?
Yes. It's just going to be gasoline. Let's just put gasoline in these glass. I mean, anything in a glass bottle with a cork, you're like, oh, that's a pretty rad old school drug. It's like laudanum. It's what they went down, what they threw down in Tombstone. Anyways, I just want to point out, what a romance. You drop a little ether. I'm sure that's what the kids say. You drop a little ether, and then you kiss someone you knew when they were 3. They stirred vats together, Wait, no. What was it? Something about sharing vessels? Oh, is that where that comes from? Is sharing vessels because they stirred a vat? Is that... Tom, did we just figure this whole thing out? I think that's where that term comes from. We shared a vessel. Kier Egan and Imogen, which is a great name, they shared a vessel. Boom, we solved it. You're welcome, America, and the rest of the world.
That was like the national treasure style key. You found it.
Golly, you discover a lot, but every once in a while, my dumb brain makes a connection. All right, so she's frantically looking for something. Sissy's shouting scripture at her. She's just rooting through this lady's house, which seemed a little bit unfair, but it is what it is. And then she goes outside, and we go to the shed, which you could not pay me $1 million to go into that shed. It's probably cold. There's probably wolverines in it. And not without a gun and a flashlight am I entering. There's a zombie in there, 100%.
I mean, it seemed more like a hobbit hole to me, and I would argue that was the first place I would have checked for somebody like creepily hiding something. I would go there.
No, not a hobbit hole, Tom. Hobbit holes are like warm. I mean, Tolkien described it as like a comforting place. This is once again where you keep your zombie buddy chained up.
I think this is like a cabin in the woods situation where you go down to the basement and then you pick like your object of your demise. I think that's what's going on here.
Sure, that's fair. All right, Tom, I'll give you the floor. She finds an old yearbook. There's a bunch of written words. You paused. Read me a story, Tom.
Of course I paused. Like a lot of the details of it didn't seem to make like a whole lot of, not that didn't make sense, but they weren't necessarily adding a lot, but essentially it's just showing her as the valedictorian. It shows her as the Wintertide Fellowship Award for her dedication to the 9 core values. And it's actually awarded by James Egan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a younger version of him gave the award. And we even got in like the flashback of Helena talking to Mark, like in the first time, like their outies are talking. And she kind of mentions that James Egan actually created the severance procedure. So you can kind of see again the tie of James and Harmony were close, and James essentially took Harmony's work for his own. And again, I think like we mentioned at the top, this kind of explains some of the Miss Wong of it all. And likely she is probably the valedictorian of her class of, is it Myrtle Egan High School for Kids or whatever it's called. There is another funny little thing there where it has like a banner on top, and like the mascot of the school is apparently the Fighting Kids. So it says "Go Fighting Kids," which is pretty funny.
I did not notice that. That's incredible. So James is a man. James is not a woman.
He's the one that says "fetid moppet" to Helena at the beginning of the season.
Oh, and cuts his own hair. Okay,
yes.
A lot of white hair, and everyone's cutting their own. James is a terrible name. The only other like famous James is James Gum from Silence of the Lambs. I believe Buffalo Bill is James Gum. So Never a good. Don't name your kid James. Just add the S, and their life will be infinitely better. Um, okay, so well, the statue was of. I thought the statue was female, so the statue was not James. The statue was a different older Egan, and then James was Cobell's classmate. I got it. I
think it
understand.
was Jane. I don't know who it was. It's an Egan for sure. It's a bust of an Egan, but that's where she finds her, I guess, old notebook.
Sure, sure. And do you want to go into the fact that she was the creator of Severance? Like, was this was the whole point of this episode, right?
Exactly. Yeah. This moment where she's like, I'm the one who invented it. They kind of go through the schematics of her little pictures of brains and the chip and graphs and charts. And I'm sure it's all very, like, I try to pause a little bit of it, but it just kind of seemed like not necessarily nonsense, but didn't really help me uncover much about the show. But I like how this fills her in as a character, and while she feels so like jaded by this company where they stole her invention, and she still kind of realized she couldn't say anything because she still wanted to stay close to it, and now we know that she wants to like finish her work with Mark. It kind of opens that up and gives us a little bit more context to that, like, because this truly is her work and what she has developed.
Okay, this notebook is old. So if Cobell created Severance, why did she create it? And she created it when she was a child. When you're stirring a vat of ether, you just become super smart. And you're like, man, I wonder if we can inject microchips into people's brains. And Hampton's like, you want to get high? And she's like, I'm thinking about something. One sec.
I'm assuming this is all part of her Wintertide. Like, when she got the award, she leaves at 12, and then she goes and essentially internships with Jamie Egan. So, like, they are working together to develop this. So, I think she's just kind of using this to show these are the notes she took as she developed it, not necessarily notes she took before the age of 12.
See, I mean, typically when you work for a company and you invent something, they own the invention. So once again, I'm on the Lumen and Egan side. I just think she should have read her employment paperwork when they signed her on at 5. At least, she should have gotten a lawyer to look at it. But I bet she probably signed a non-compete too, and she wasn't paying attention. So I don't know. Once again, I'm on Lumen's side, through and through a Lumen man. Tom, that's what they say. So I guess my question would be, what I was trying to drive at a little bit is, when you develop a procedure like Severance, like, you would think something traumatic happened in her life that she would want to be severed, right? Or was this simply, we developed Severance for workers? Like, did her mom dying, which she thought her aunt killed her, but it turns out her mom killed herself. Like, does that event cause her to want to sever? Does she want to sever from, like, this childhood? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, why?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Was
like,
it just her and James kicking around ideas? And he's like, hey, it'd be great if I didn't remember yesterday. And she's like, oh, I've got a microchip for that. Like, I guess there's got to be more to it than we were just, like, in a brainstorming meeting, and someone threw out microchip in brain that severs personality. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because we still don't know what the overarching mission of Lumen is. Like, from a corporate perspective, yeah, maybe they're trying to market it as a way to not feel any sort of pain in your life. But obviously they have, I think, ulterior motives to do more and try to bring Kier's consciousness back is still kind of where my head goes. But they also showed in the flashback, in the kind of the start of the episode, that Harmony has this Severance chip that she wears almost as like a necklace. And I'm wondering, like, is that the first Severance chip? Was she severed at some point and then was able to get it out? Like, I don't know what that's supposed to signify. So while they do give us a host of answers in this episode, I still think we have a lot to question.
Sure. Is Hampton dead?
I don't know if he's dead, but I appreciate his last line if he is dead. He says, "Come tame these tempers, a-holes."
Yeah, that actor was like, hey, you got to give me something. Like, I flew out to Finland for this, like, or Newfoundland, whatever it was. Like, give me a cool line. So I At first, I got confused. This episode was a little bit like shot dark. I thought. When the car starts moving and she's in it and he's standing outside, I didn't realize she got into the driver's seat. So I was like, oh no, Hampton gave her up to someone. And then I was like, oh no, she's driving. That's how cars work, Julian. So good work.
I also don't feel like there's a lot of roads out of this peninsula that this house is on. So I don't know where she's going.
No, this is like the town that what's the water superhero? Aquaman. This is like the town Aquaman's from. There's like one coastal road. Did I nail it, Tom? Did I bring in all the Marvel fans?
You did it, buddy. Waterman.
Waterman.
Water dude.
H2O guy. All right. So then we end.
I was going to say it.
Go ahead.
Before you get to the end, I think it's worth saying, like, they had the little struggle with. I like how Harmony hands the notes to Sissy, like standing next to a fire. That seemed very ill-advised. And they really foreshadowed the papers trying to get thrown in the fire. So as always, like the cinematography is still fantastic in the show because like the fire is like illuminating their faces as they're having this conversation. But I do think it's important to point out that Sissy says like, the mom essentially pulled her own tube or took her own life, but she was sick in the soul and she was filled with malice. And malice we know being one of the four tempers, and like how everybody is. Everybody has different personalities just based off of how much of these tempers they have. So the idea that the mom was kind of full of malice, I thought was an interesting line.
That was interesting. And I am glad that you brought up the papers near the fire thing. That's like someone finds the original Gutenberg Bible and they hand it to a Satanist who's standing by a fire. You're like, probably not going to go well. But yeah, bad on Cobell. Bad on her for not protecting that paper. Although she does get it back. I enjoyed talking about this episode maybe more than some of the slower parts. I still enjoyed it. I liked the reveal. And I guess now that she's got her book, she's headed back to town. Is that where we're going?
Yeah, we've got a couple calls from Devin throughout the episode, and now as she's in her car taking her leave, she actually answers it, and Devin kind of says, hey, Mark is being reintegrated, and then her line of like, tell me everything, putting Mark on the phone, I thought is great, and it's just her like officially wanting to, I think, burn the house or the Lumen house down to the ground, and even the song choice they used I thought was fantastic, which is Firewoman from the Cult. So very on the nose and a fantastic song.
I don't know that song, but it sounds wonderful. I love Colts, I love fire, and I love women. So three things that all really... Anyways, I can't believe we record this. Tom, any final thoughts on this episode before we get out of here? It was a short one, which I appreciate, but we learned quite a bit.
Yeah, it was a short one. We got a couple new characters. I'm glad we finally got the amazing Patricia Arquette back because she's such a force in the first season, and to be kind of away from her for so long, I would have almost liked this maybe a little bit sooner. But now kind of getting her with Mark, I think, is going to be exciting. I'm also interested to see what's going to happen with like Ragabi, and because like even as Harmony's like leaving, she kind of like even mentions Ragabi's name. So like they have obviously no love lost between them. Like, are they going to work together? Now that Harmony wants to kind of potentially take down Lumen, I'm interested to see what that relationship will be, because obviously Ragabi gave Devin a ultimatum, like if you bring her in, I'm out, like you're not going to see me again. So,
right.
But yeah,
I would also like to point out that no one is talking about how Ragabi murdered someone in earlier in the show, just flat out murdered them, and we've never addressed that. So I just want to point that out, murdered someone. But
yeah, that's fair.
It's fine. I'm sure that person's family also forgot about them. All right. For those of you that are listening, what'd we miss? You can reach us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. Tom will talk about all the other stuff. If you would please rate and review on the device or program application, they call it, that you listen on. It helps us out. And Tom, what did I forget?
And this is why Julian doesn't do any of our social media. Follow us at Team Binge or at Team Binge Podcast on the social media of your choice, as long as it's not Facebook, because we don't really use Facebook. But yeah, let us know what you think about the show. Again, there's
Facebook all the time.
I from what I saw like last night and this morning, kind of looking through the socials, I think there definitely is a mixed bag of what people thought of this episode. But I mean, this is setting up our penultimate. So
we loved it.
Yeah. So I'm with you. Like after talking through it, it was a slower episode. It wasn't my favorite, obviously, of the season, but it definitely gave us some great backstory, and I'm excited to see her get now integrated with Mark and where they go from here.
Sure. Yeah, she's back. We're getting the team back together, you know?
Of course.
And she's, the only thing I'll be disappointed in is if she takes that notebook to like the Egans and demands like her job back and demands recognition. My hope is that she takes that back and works with Mark and burns the place down. That's some hope. That would be the hope. But, hope isn't one of the 9, Tom, so we don't pay attention to it. But with that, for Team Binge, I've been Julian.
And I have been Tom. Until next week, everybody.